When I was in high school, I was in a church choir. The Metro Detroit churches they send kids from all over. It's about 150 kids in this choir. And we sang that song. So this was like deja vu when you started singing it. Except all of us in the bass section would sit there and act goofy while we were singing it. So we would go, Joshua hit the battle of Jericho. And we would act real silly. So that's what I was doing during the whole song. Sorry. Matsiko is coming, as I mentioned before, and I do need some more host homes. So if you want to host some students, please let me know, because we need a couple more host homes for that week. In the early 1960s, Raymond Floyd was one of the best pro golfers in America. I see Jim nodding his head. You remember that name, Raymond Floyd. He was a hot shot, brand new on the tour, was winning like crazy, and he was a big, big star, competing for the PGA Championship every year. One day, he went down to Dallas, Texas, because he wanted to make a little extra money between matches. And so there was a little culture in Texas where local farmers and oil men would do these high-stake shootouts between tour pros and local pros. And people put a lot of bets on them, and he could make a little extra money. So he heard about this one club called Horizon Hills. And it was a dusty Texas golf course covered with more Texas hardpan than grass, but people still found a way to play golf there. And he was going to play the local golf instructor, the local pro, for some big money with some big bets. Raymond Floyd showed up. He was greeted by a Mexican-American course worker in a golf cart who drove him to the clubhouse, carried his bag, and offered to shine his shoes for him. When it got to be time for lunch, the guy was showing him where he could eat his lunch and said, after lunch, it'll be time to play. And the guy says, well, you know what? I've been down here an hour or two. I haven't even met the guy. Who am I playing? Ray Floyd wanted to know, who's this local pro that he was going to play golf against? And this cart boy, shoe shiner, caddy said, actually, it's me. And Raymond Floyd was taken aback. He kind of laughed at first. He said, are you serious? He said, yeah. He said, small course. We're not like one of those rich country clubs out, near Dallas. We're just out here in the country a little bit, and I got hired to be the handyman. Before I knew it, I was caddying, fixing the golf carts, and after a while, they told me to teach people how to play golf, so I just got to do everything here. We don't have any other staff. It's just me. Floyd could not believe it. He just could not believe it, but he thought, well, you know what? I'm here. Might as well play. So he ate lunch, and he got ready to play. One thing bothered him. He knew that there were all these big oil men from Texas that were betting on him, but he didn't know who was betting on the other guy because there has to be money on both sides. So he asked around a little bit. They said, oh, all the cottonseed farmers. They love to bet. They just love to bet. And they're all betting on the local guy. Okay. So he went to tee off on the first hole, and he got there, and he looked, and lining both sides of the fairway were pickup trucks. It was all those farmers. Those farmers would come out in their pickup trucks, and they'd just park right on the edge of the fairway, and they'd watch. That's a little strange. So he shot a nice drive down the center of the fairway. His opponent did the same thing. They started to walk down the fairway, and all of a sudden those trucks fired up, roared down to the green, parked next to the green to watch him putt. It's a little different. Ray Floyd wasn't exactly used to it, but he thought, it's okay, I can play in anything. So he went ahead and played his game. And he played a great game. He wasn't really worried about the competition. After all, he was Ray Floyd, PGA Tour Pro. And he shot a great game that day. He shot a 67, 4 under par. Boy, any day of the week, he would say he would be proud to shoot that game. But not that day, because that local pro, the cart boy, the shoe shine boy, shot a 65, beat him by 2 strokes. Turned out, this fella was the son of a gravedigger, very, very poor, and the only reason he'd ever really encountered golf was because at 14 he had to drop out of school and start working to take care of his family because his dad had left him high and dry. So he started caddying full time, kind of liked the game of golf. So after work, he'd shoot 300 balls every day. His name was Lee Trevino, and he would go on to be known as Super Mex, hero to Mexican Americans and one of the greatest golfers of all time. This Hall of Fame golfer became one of only 4 players ever to win the U.S. Open, the PGA Championship, and the Open Championship twice each. Obscurity to infamy. Shoeshine boy to Hall of Famer. rags to riches, oppressed to privileged, overlooked to unforgettable. All of those phrases describe his story. But not just his story. These stories of movement from oppression to privilege, from being overlooked to being unforgettable, to move from one side of the aisle to the other, they can also be used to describe the story of women. Today, women are fully legal citizens in 70 countries, which make up 1/2 of the world's population. According to the work of Sven-Erik Skanning and his colleagues, women have the full and equal right to vote in 100% of all countries that vote. There are still 6 countries in the world that do not allow anyone to vote. According to the Varieties of Democracy poll, 1/3 of all the countries in the world have had a woman serve as their chief executive in the last 250 years. According to the United Nations, women's literacy has risen to 84% worldwide, only 6% behind that of men. There's still a long way to go. There's massive gaps and inequalities in pay. There's violence towards women in many parts of the world. There is a lot of work to be done on political representation. But overall, the state of women's equality in the world today is unbelievable. It's unimaginable given its history. If you go back just a few hundred years, or if you really want to go back into ancient societies, what you'll see is not pretty at all. Women, for most of human history, were little more than property. And like Lee Trevino, over the past few thousand years, women have gone from obscurity to equality, from oppressed to respected, from property to personhood. And I would submit to you that all of this started with God speaking into existence a vision of respect for all human life. All the way back in Genesis 1:27, we have an astounding statement found nowhere else in the ancient world. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them male and female. He created them. Historically, we can trace an upward trajectory of women's rights. And you go back in the beginning and look, it's not there. It's not one of these things where it was there in some places, but it's not there anywhere. For the Romans, women were just a piece of property. Here's what it says in a first century Roman law. The woman passed from the authority of her father to the authority of her husband as property. You can go back to one of the people who had more influence on Western society than just about anybody else, Greek philosopher Aristotle, and here's what he taught. The male is by nature superior, and the female inferior. The one rules, and the other is ruled. You can go back further than that to Babylon, where Herodotus records, if a woman enters a temple and is chosen by a man, he shall pay her a silver coin and lie with her. This is not shameful. Now just take just a second and think about what he just said. If a woman, any woman, single, married, mother of children, not a mother of children, it doesn't matter. High society, low society, any woman enters a pagan temple and a man chooses to hand her a coin, she has become now a prostitute, no choice of her own. A woman on the temple grounds is a prostitute, whether she wants to be or not. That is what Herodotus records about Babylon. No agency. You go back 1,000 years before that to the time of Moses. And contemporary with Moses is something called the Hammurabi's Code, which is what we believe to be the first written set of laws anywhere in the world. And in the Hammurabi Code it says, if a man gives his wife to another man and she bears children, the children belong to the husband, not the wife. And this law is usually shown, exemplified to show that the children belong to the husband, that the women didn't have rights to own her own children. But there's another more stunningly awful thing in this law. which is that husbands in this society had the right to loan their wives out at their own discretion, with no choice of the woman. At any point in time, a husband could loan his wife out, just like you might loan a toaster or your car. And this was the law of the land. The first written law in human history gave men the right to loan their wives out and gave them exclusive ownership of the children. It wasn't any better in Asia. In ancient India, the woman was forbidden independence from the man. Here's a law. A woman must obey her father before marriage, her husband after marriage, and her son after her husband's death. How many of y'all are going to go for that? Your husband dies and now your son becomes your master? And in ancient China, in the tradition of Confucianism, a woman must obey her father before marriage. I read the wrong one in the wrong order. That's in the Chinese tradition. In the Indian tradition, it was a husband must constantly be worshipped as a god by the faithful wife. So in India, a husband must be worshipped as a god by the wife, and in China, their ownership is transferred to the son upon their death. So you can go back anywhere in the world, in the earliest societies, and you will not find rights of women. Now, we say, oh, what about the Queen of Sheba? There are pockets and places where women, through sheer force of will or violence, took power for short periods of time. And you know what happened when that woman relinquished her grip? When she ceased to have the power? All women in the society were punished. And the state of women was worse than it was before it began. Because in the beginning, there was no right or respect for women other than as being property. So how did women get from there to here? And like we said before, there's still a long way to go. But how did we get from there to here? Well, the world has an answer. The culture around us has an answer for that. They will say secular humanism. This is the idea that man is really, really great. Mankind is really, really smart. And if we all work really hard, we can come up with the right ideas to fix all of our problems. We can get beyond all of our prejudices. We can recognize the worth of all people. We can solve all the world's problems. We can cure cancer. We can create the perfect society because we've evolved on our own to end up on the right side of history. The problem is that secular humanism is empty. It's shallow. It's untrue in every way imaginable. Just think about this. The same arguments that are used for secular humanism to be the answer that will end the oppression of women, or will end the oppression of races, or will end the oppression of marginalized people, the same arguments were used for dominion of creation. As humans, we will create a beautiful society. We will build cities and empires. We'll take the resources of the world and we'll go into space and we'll climb the mountains and we'll go to the depths of the sea and we'll create the perfect society. And in the meantime, what did we do? Well, we filled our atmosphere with carbon, our oceans with plastic, enslaved marginalized people in our sweatshops and mines, and cut down half of our forests. See, secular humanism creates more problems than it solves. Why? Because we know that humans are depraved and broken, and there's good in us, but alongside of it exists evil. And people are attracted to power. So secular humanism is not the answer. I contend this trajectory of increased women's rights entered the world not from the mind of man, but as a whisper from God. A stark contrast to everything that the world stood for, and it's an unimaginable concept which set off a chain of events over thousands of years leading us to where we are today, which began when God said he created both genders in his image, which was a completely unique thing. The Judeo-Christian ethic that man and women were equally created before God as image bearers with value is not found in any other ancient religion, philosophy, law, or culture. And this is not something that is just being said by Christians. I'm going to show you a chart real quick. This is a chart that shows other religions. I know it'll be a little hard to see, but it says that in the Mesopotamian, the Unimaginable, women were not created in the divine image. They did not have equality with men. In ancient Egypt, women were not created in the divine image, did not have equality with men. In Greek mythology, women were not created in the divine image, did not have equality with men. In the Hindu texts, in Confucianism, they were not in the divine image and they were not in the equality of men. And you can go through even minor religions and you will find this to be true. Even secular historians, atheists and agnostic historians recognize this fact. There's a very famous secular historian named Gerda Lerner, and she writes about how the Bible stands apart on this issue. This is what she says. The Genesis narrative presents a simultaneous creation of man and women, both bearing the image of the divine, which contrasts with the sequential and hierarchical creation stories of the neighboring cultures. It wasn't there in the beginning except among God's people. This is why the account between God and Hagar is so mind-blowing. Now, we talked about this account a little bit 2 weeks ago for those of you that were here. But let me remind you, Hagar was a slave girl. She was Egyptian, and she likely was given to Abraham and Sarah as a gift after the Pharaoh of Egypt had tried but failed to steal Sarah away as his own wife. And once Abraham, who had lied about it, was found out that they were really married, and this curse came upon Pharaoh's house, and he wanted Abraham to appease Abraham's God. He gave Abraham all kinds of gifts. Just take the curse away. And he gave Sarah back. And one of those gifts was probably Hagar. In fact, most scholars believe that her name wasn't even Hagar. Her real name has been lost to history. But that Hagar was a word that Abraham and Sarah used to call her, which meant something like stranger, because she wasn't like them. How would you like to be given to someone else and then those people just refer to you for the rest of your life as stranger? Hey, stranger. Hey, stranger, go get me this. Hey, stranger, go get me that. She was a nameless stranger. She was invisible except when she became useful. And one particular day, she was useful. Sarah said, you know, this whole have a kid thing, it's not working. Why don't you sleep with stranger over there and see if she can have a baby? And it'll be it'll be our property anyway, right? It's what everybody says. Hammurabi's code, contemporary with us, says you have a baby with her. It's your kid, not hers. So just have a kid with her. But you know, humans, jealousy, all those things come into play. And Sarah, who has this great idea, she's not real happy about it once it happens. So she mistreats Hagar. Hagar ends up running away twice. And in the first instance, we find her, a stranger, somebody who's nameless and invisible, that's not going to be remembered. Abraham and Sarah are going to go on to be heroes of the faith, fathers and mothers of a nation, remembered for all of history. And here she is, this slave woman, probably just a young teenage girl, handed to a man by no choice of her own, pregnant with his child, mistreated by his wife, alone and dying in the wilderness, invisible. Who will see her? Who will hear her? Who will stand up for her? Who will love her? And who will protect her? And that's what we find in Genesis 16. Verses 7 through 9 of Genesis 16. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was this spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from? And where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai, she answered. And the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. This is verse 13. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now been seen by the one who sees me. This girl was invisible to everyone. More than likely sold into slavery by her parents, possibly born into slavery. Either way, She has no identity. Given away by her first master because she's not worth enough. Ignored and called stranger by her second. Doing everything that's asked of her, and still she ends up being mistreated. No one has ever seen her. But God sees her. God values this woman because God values women. God isn't interested in Hammurabi's code. God's not going, I really would like to help you out, but you're just a woman in this society. Come back in a few thousand years and maybe I can do something. But right now, you're not worth anything. That's not how God works. God is no respecter of persons. God says, I made you in my image, Hagar, and I see you. I've seen you all along. And I see you today. And I will bless you. There are so many women in our world, especially young women in distress, who do not feel seen by God because they are not seen by his people. She's not invisible. She's going to be seen again after Isaac is born, when her son is no longer needed and he's run off by Sarah. She will be seen by God when Ishmael is dying of thirst in the desert and the angel leads her to a well. She will be seen again by God when she finds Ishmael a wife and his family grows and prospers. She will never not be seen by God. He is the God who sees. That's my absolute favorite name for God in the whole Bible. It's probably the least popular name for God. We have whole songs with all the names of God. And this is the name that this woman who is not part of the promise, she's a foreign person. She's a nobody. And she has the audacity to name God. And she gives him the most beautiful name, the God who sees. Oh, that I could be seen by the God who sees. See, compassion is part of God's nature. The world might see her as discarded property, but that is not how God sees her. He sees a woman. He sees women. God is communicating. This story is preserved for a reason. And one of the reasons is that God is sending a very clear message to all of mankind that he cares about everyone, that he cares about women, that they matter to him. Just like he's going to care about women when Miriam will prophesy, when Moses was supposed to be the star of the story, or when Deborah becomes a judge, or when Jesus accepts women as equals to the men, talking with them and teaching them, and even the disciples want to rebuke him for it. And he won't let them. Or when God makes sure that the first witnesses to the most incredible event in the history of humanity, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, are women. Or when Paul will write that there is neither man nor woman in Christ. Can't you see that this idea entered the world through our God? But our heads were so thick, it's taken us thousands of years to even get close to living out what he intended. And like everything else, Satan wants to rewrite the narrative so that it wasn't God who introduced this idea, but it was us super smart humans, and it was God's people who were the big patriarchal meanies trying to keep women down. And I will tell you, is there patriarchy in the church? Is there patriarchy in the history of God's people? Yes. Because there was patriarchy in the world, and the church existed in the world. And surprise, the church was populated by people who lived in this world. But it was the church which first wrestled with it, saying, this doesn't seem right. This world we live in doesn't seem to line up with what we're reading about in Scripture. Gender equality didn't come from the world. It came from God, and it was handed to us in the pages of Scripture. And the church dug that out and found it and started to raise the flag and say, hey, maybe we should do things differently. Equality of women, it wasn't imaginable. It was completely unimaginable. Until it wasn't. Now, you might have figured out by now that the point of this whole series, Unimaginable, that we're in, is to try and take back what rightfully belongs to God from the hordes of hell. Because I'm sick and tired of being told that we humans are so great and God is to blame for all the world's problems. Oh, it's God and his people in the church that caused all these problems. God elevated women. God reconciled the races. God ended slavery. God sent black and white Christ followers across Selma Bridge to be beaten with pipes for civil rights. God introduced the idea of compassion, hospitals, education, equality, the value of life, and hope into our world. Study history. It's true. Even secular historians will say, yeah, all of these ideas in Western society didn't come from people. They actually came from the Judeo-Christian thought. The arrows of history all point back to God and his people. We just haven't been very good or consistent at following God's lead. So yes, God's people have always been a big hot mess, and we will continue to be. We are as good as anybody at making mistakes and struggling with sin and getting it wrong. But we've also been the first on the scene to try to right wrongs, fight injustice, and care for the hurting. It's all recorded in human history. And all of these things were unimaginable before God spoke them into existence, and our world would be unrecognizable today if he had not. Personally, I am grateful that we serve a God who values all life, regardless of gender, race, age, wealth, or intellectual ability. We are seen by him. You are seen by him. Every one of us is seen by him. No matter who you are, God sees you. So let us praise him together for being a God who sees.